It was a quiet, humid night in Ahmedabad, the kind where airport runways shimmer under artificial lights and distant city noise hums like a lullaby. At precisely 1:38 a.m. local time, Air India, Flight 171, received clearance for takeoff. Destination, London Gatwick. On board, 241 souls, unaware that the next 32 seconds would turn hope into horror. As the Boeing aircraft surged down runway 23, its massive engines roared like awakened beasts, cutting through the stillness. Then, without warning, silence. Within seconds of liftoff, the aircraft's cockpit lights blinked once, twice, and then dimmed ominously. The first engine's fuel control switch, which should have remained in the run position to keep fuel flowing, inexplicably shifted to cutoff. A second later, the same happened to the second engine. No fire, no visible external trigger, just a baffling, deadly shutdown of both power plants mid-air. How could two engines on a modern jetline reach, capable of keeping the aircraft aloft independently, fail simultaneously within seconds? And if the cause wasn't external, could it be something worse, a hidden flaw lurking within the systems that power commercial aviation? If you're fascinated by the untold stories behind aviation disasters and black box revelations, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss our next deep dive into the sky's darkest mysteries. In the cockpit, confusion reigned. The flight data recorder captured a frenzy of alerts. The cockpit voice recorder, human disbelief. "Why did you cut off?" asked Pilot 1. "I didn't do it," replied Pilot 2. Panic didn't set in, it was worse. It was sheer helplessness. Both pilots had no idea what had just happened. If they didn't do it, then, or what did? As the plane lost thrust, a small mechanical appendage called the Rattramair turbine automatically deployed. It's a backup meant to provide emergency power if both engines fail, essentially acting as a wind-powered generator. But the Rat is not designed to save a full aircraft, just to buy moments desperately, few moments. In this case, it merely confirmed the worst. Both engines had failed, and the Rat was the last line of defense. Have you ever considered how terrifyingly fast technology can fail, even when all protocols are followed? Below, the night was interrupted by something far louder than silence. A massive fireball lit up the sky as the plane crashed near a local hostel, killing 260 people, in total 241 on board, and 19 on the ground. The only survivor, pulled from the wreckage, defied all odds. Even seasoned rescue teams whispered the word miracle. Why did that one life survive while hundreds were extinguished? From the moment wreckage was discovered, the hunt began not just for answers, but for accountability. Families clutched photos, newsrooms speculated wildly, and pilots across the country asked the same question: could this happen to us? What does it mean when an aircraft, designed to withstand multiple failures, falls from the sky because of a glitch no one saw coming? And so the black boxes became sacred. Carried from the crash site like relics, they held not just data and dialogue, but truth. The flight data recorder, FDR, showed clean readings until both engines abruptly stopped receiving fuel. The cockpit voice recorder, CVR, revealed even more: disbelief, not incompetence. Neither pilot initiated the fuel shutoff. Neither saw it coming, or what had turned off the sky. This was no act of sabotage, no fuel contamination, no external collision, no bad weather. The aircraft was well maintained, below weight limits, and cleared for travel. So where, then, was the crack in the system? Could the danger be embedded not in the metal, but in the code? As the wreckage cooled and investigators sifted through shards of alloy and wire, a darker suspicion began to emerge, not born of malice, but of oversight. Somewhere, perhaps deep within the software systems, governing engine control or cockpit interface, a ghost had lived undetected. If one ghost could hide in one plane, how many more were flying undetected tonight? From the charred remains of Flight 171, the official investigation began with almost surgical precision. At the helm was India's Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, AAIB, but they weren't alone. Because this was a Boeing aircraft, powered by US-made General Electric engines, America's own National Transportation Safety Board and Federal Aviation Administration also stepped in. What unfolded was a global examination of a local catastrophe. The first detail that stunned investigators came from the flight's timeline. From takeoff to crash, just 32 seconds had passed. In that time, both engines had inexplicably shut down, not sputtered, not lost partial power, but completely cut off from fuel. The switches that control this officially known as fuel control valves are not something pilots typically touch unless facing an onboard fire or ordered by ground control. But according to the CVR, neither pilot issued any such command. "Why did you cut off?" one asked the other, to which came the chilling reply, "I didn't do so." These weren't the words of denial. They were the stunned realization of a crew that had been overridden by their own aircraft. Could an airplane act against its own crew? The AAIB turned its attention to the cockpit design. In most commercial aircraft, fuel control valves are toggled via switches that feed into electronic control units. These units interpret the pilot's command, so it's supposed to go. But what if something else issued the command? A phantom signal, a misfired software routine. Was this the product of a system miscommunication, something that translated run into cut off? The investigators also reviewed the role of the ram air turbine, RAT. Its deployment is automatic, only triggered when both engines fail, a fact that further confirmed the sequence of events. The RAT served as a last-gasp electrical power source, but it could not save the aircraft. However, its very activation was forensic gold-it-proved dual-engine failure beyond doubt. Have you ever thought about how many backup systems your safety depends on, and how thin their margins truly are? As they dug deeper, the team ruled out nearly every familiar culprit: bird strikes, fuel contamination, pilot error, even maintenance issues. The aircraft had undergone routine service just 3 days earlier. Its weight was within safe limits, its fuel was clean, its thrust levers and flight control surfaces all matched expected positions. So, what's left when every known cause is eliminated? Attention shifted toward the digital nervous system of the aircraft, the software. Investigators began reviewing flight control modules, switch logic designs, and the aircraft's automatic systems. Every line of code became suspect. Had there been a latent bug, dormant for years, that finally emerged in a moment of critical importance? Was it possible that this crash began not in the cockpit or the hangar, but in a keyboard years ago? Further suspicions grew around the electrical interface between the cockpit and the engine control units. If a short circuit occurred, even briefly, could it have sent a false command to shut off the engines? Could electromagnetic interference or a hardware fault trigger such a scenario? And if SAWI didn't, any warning systems go off? The AAIB's preliminary report stated explicitly that the shutdown was not crew-initiated. That meant the cause was likely technical software, logic failure, a hardware malfunction, or a catastrophic systems miscommunication. But finding the exact node of failure in a system with thousands of inputs and cross-checks was like finding a needle in a field of needles. How do you debug something when the only crash log is buried in ashes? One particularly unnerving possibility emerged. Could the software update recently pushed by Boeing to the engine control systems be at fault? These updates often aim to improve performance or fix known bugs. But occasionally, a new update creates a new vulnerability, one not caught in testing. And then the question expanded. If one aircraft had this flaw, how many others could be next? The inquiry team reviewed similar Boeing 787-based models across other fleets, scanning for anomalies in switch behavior, fuel control responsiveness, or unexplained resets. The silence was disturbing, because silence could mean nothing was found or nothing was being reported. Is silence safetier? Is it simply what comes before the storm? Meanwhile, aviation authorities considered issuing Safety Advisory 7 before the final report. The stakes were too high. Fuel control valves, normally a background player in the aviation world, had now become the subject of intense scrutiny. Engineers began stress testing their reliability across scenarios. Could a power surge reset the valve's position? Could moisture or static electricity scramble an input? Could user interface design errors mislead a pilot or send duplicate commands? And amid all this, grief. Families who had lost loved ones weren't just mourning. They were demanding justice, not revenge, but something harder to obtain, and truth. They wanted to know who was responsible, and more hauntingly, why their loved ones never stood a chance. Can a system be held accountable the way a human can? At the heart of this investigation lies one conclusion. The pilots did nothing wrong. They followed procedures, communicated clearly, and acted swiftly. That removes human error and shifts the blame to the very systems designed to protect them. The haunting possibility is not that the system failed. It's that it worked as instructed only. No one knows who gave the order. The crash of Air India Flight 171 didn't just shake public confidence, it rattled the foundation of modern aviation systems. When a machine defies its operators, when code behaves with unintended autonomy, it forces the entire industry to confront a chilling question. Is our trust in automation misplaced? In the days following the preliminary report's release, a whirlwind of meetings erupted across continents. Boeing's crisis teams assembled in Seattle. General Electric dispatched specialists from Ohio. India's Directorate General of Civil Aviation, DGCA, huddled with the AAIB. And the FAA began combing through technical documentation of similar aircraft configurations. The conversations weren't just about what failed, they were about what else could. What other aircrafts shared the same electronic control interface? How widespread was the software patch installed 3 weeks before Flight 171's doomed takeoff? Were there latent bugs that had gone undetected in other jets' bugs that, under the right conditions, could trigger another ghost shutdown? Is it possible that we're flying blind in a system that hides its own malfunctions until it's too late? In this case, the investigation zeroed in on the possibility of an electrical logic misfire, a moment where the engine fuel control software received a rogue signal mimicking an emergency command. This might have occurred through a cascade of corrupted inputs, or even a stuck relay in the cockpit control console. Though rare, these kinds of errors can appear in edge case scenarios and are notoriously hard to reproduce. Boeing, meanwhile, issued an internal bulletin urging operators to conduct diagnostic scans on all 787s with a similar engine control configuration. Airlines quietly complied. Some took aircraft out of service temporarily, but the key word here is quietly, because while the world mourns, the industry also protects. Should these decisions be made behind closed doors, or should transparency always win? Regulators, for their part, began working on interim safety advisories. The DGCA hinted at new cockpit monitoring protocols and manual override checks during takeoff roll. The FAA considered mandating a firmware rollback on certain engine control units, and rumors swirled that the SAA European Union's Aviation Authority was considering its own independent probe. Could we be looking at the aviation equivalent of a global product recall? Yet, through all of this, one unsettling fact persisted. There were no prior warnings, no other incident reports, no pilot complaints, no system flags. That made Flight 171 both an outlier and a terrifying precedent. For in aviation, outliers don't bring relief, they bring red flags. What if this wasn't a one-in-a-million event, but the first in a sequence? While technical teams tore through circuit schematics and signal maps, families of the victims fought a different battle: public remembrance. Memorials sprang up in Ahmedabad and London. Candles flickered beside black and white portraits. Social media turned their names into hashtags. But no candle, no vigil, no trending tweet could extinguish the question: could this have been prevented? Could your life or mine be lost to a line of rogue code? Public trust in aviation of the most rigorously safe industries in the world, faced a subtle but undeniable shift. Airlines began seeing a spike in customer queries about aircraft models. A handful of travelers canceled flights. Some YouTubers stoked conspiracy theories, though investigators quickly dismissed sabotage. Still, fear had crept in, and it would take more than safety audits to flush it out. In the meantime, investigative focus turned inward, to manufacturing logs, supplier QC reports, and chip integrity in the fuel control modules. Could a microscopic fault in a semiconductor trigger an all-systems shutdown? Could electrostatic discharge from a rushed maintenance operation cause the valves to misread their position? The further they looked, the more the truth blurred. How do you prevent something when you don't fully understand how it happened? By month's end, the AAIB announced that a supplemental update would be published in 3 months, detailing test outcomes and any immediate recommendations. The final report? Expected within 12-18 months. But there was already talk that the agency might issue early mandatory directives, perhaps changes to fuel valve design or cockpit override mechanics. In the meantime, whispers grew louder. Could this trigger a class action lawsuit? Could governments force Boeing to offer settlements? If a software glitch was confirmed, could this reshape certification protocols worldwide? Will the next pilot trust their instruments or fear them? For now, the skies are quiet. Planes continue to take off, glide through cloud banks, and land with textbook precision. But for those who know the story of Flight 171, every liftoff is now shadowed by a new awareness. Systems don't just fail because of rust or fatigue. Sometimes they fail because they were told toe end. No one knows who gave the order. And in that uncertainty, aviation finds itself at a crossroads. Trust the machine more, or take some control back? Which would you choose? The tragedy of Air India Flight 171 does more than mark a devastating loss of life. It leaves behind a legacy of unanswered questions, lingering doubts, and a quiet, unsettling fear that in the age of smart machines, even the skies aren't immune to ghosts in the code. As the wreckage fades from headlines and memorials slowly blend into the silence of mourning, the real work continues in labs, boardrooms, and flight simulators across the world. Engineers probe deeper, regulators watch more closely, and pilots who once relied solely on instinct must now also navigate a growing trust in unseen algorithms. But this story, like the faint black lines of a cockpit printout, remains etched not just in memory but in protocol. Already, whispers of change ripple across the industry. More pre-flight checks, more redundancy, more accountability. Yet, beneath the buzz of progress lies a deeper realization. Some failures don't sound alarms until it's too late. We will wait months, maybe longer, for the final report. For now, the cause remains pinned somewhere between a switch that shouldn't have flipped and a decision that no one made. And in that space of not knowing, families grieve, aviation professionals reflect, and the rest of us fly on, unknowingly, under new skies. Perhaps the most important lesson is this: safety isn't static. It must be questioned, tested, and challenged continuously. Every flight we take is a promise zone built not just on trust in technology, but on the vigilance of those who refuse to accept unknown error as an answer. So as the sun sets over runway 23 once again, we remember not just the lives lost, but the silence between the engines, and we ask, quietly will the next flight listen more carefully?